Announcing a special offer from the International Hospitality Institute. From now until December 9th, 2021, IHI is offering a 20% discount to attendees at GHS who are not already members. Individual, corporate, and allied memberships are available. To join, visit internationalhospitalityinstitute.com, click on Membership, and enter GHS20 at checkout. There is no better time than now to take advantage of IHI's membership benefits. Come join IHI's global community.
While we wait for Francis, Trevor, thank you for joining. My apologies. I thought we still have about 10 minutes. So obviously we had been live. So we will get started while we wait for Francis. So you've been involved in African continent for a very long time. You have helped a lot of the brands and a lot of the owners assess out some of the investment opportunities. Tell us a bit about what the investment environment in Africa is today.
Okay, well, as usual, I'm going to say don't generalize about Africa. Africa's 54 countries, ranging from Egypt up in the top right-hand corner down to South Africa in the bottom, the Indian Ocean islands of Mauritius, the Atlantic Oceans of Cape Verde and Equatorial Guinea. So Africa is so diverse that the investment climate, for example, in Nigeria, which is the country I know best, is very different from the investment climate down in Mauritius. Things have got a lot better. There are more countries with democracy today than there used to be. Having said that, there are some very obvious conflicts still, more perhaps internal armed conflicts in Africa than in many other regions of the world. And that, of course, completely screws up your investment promotion activities. But having said that, there are many countries in Africa which have an investment climate which are open to investors in the hospitality industry. I mentioned Mauritius, I've got Kenya, I've got Tanzania, I've got South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, just to name a handful off the top of my head. Morocco.
So, Trevor, there are certain spots, if you took out South Africa or you took out the Northern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa is being talked about as the next frontier with tremendous amount of potential. But at the same time, Sub-Saharan Africa also has possibly some of the biggest challenges, not only the currency challenges, the government and social unrest. How does one evaluate these investment opportunities when you operating in an environment like that?
Well, sorry to contradict you, Abid, but I'm not going to take North Africa out of the equation. We're a global summit, but the reason being is that if you look at the top 10 countries where there is chain hotel development activity, 4 of the 5 North African countries, so we've got Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt, are in the top 10 in terms of investment activity. Egypt being by far the largest, more than double the number of rooms in development than there are in Nigeria. Okay, so having got that off my chest, in Sub-Saharan Africa, yes, there are challenges in some countries, but then, okay, I said about conflict and that, but there's conflict elsewhere, and there are no new challenges that people haven't come across before. Economic recession, for example, sliding currencies, corruption. They're in many other countries and many other regions around the world as well. How do you deal with it? Carefully, very carefully, with a proper risk assessment up front. And some companies, particularly, I guess, those are those quoted public companies on the stock exchange will have to be much more careful when going into investments than do perhaps the private entrepreneur. And the experience has been that, in fact, the vast majority of investment in hotels and hospitality in sub-Saharan Africa is actually local investment. It's not cross-border, it's local investment. And that tends to be very often high net worth individuals or groups of high net worth individuals who are investing in their own countries and have a completely different perception of risk to what maybe you do, okay? Or someone else living in Europe has a very different, and a new investor has a very different perception to an investor who's already come from outside into Africa. They have a different perception of risk and a different tolerance to risk.
So, Trevor, very good point. In traditionally in Africa, it's been the high net worth families or individuals that have owned these assets. The institutional money is just starting to get to Africa, and I'm not sure how much success they've had, particularly with pandemic put into place. The typical investment model has led to either using the big brands or having some very small one or two independently branded hotels. Does one hotel, from an investment point of view, does one hotel perform better than the other? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, again, one just can't generalize. I can give you examples of branded hotels that just do so well, they're dripping money. And I can give you examples of branded hotels that have failed compared to the independent one down the road. But the preference typically from a first-time investor, an individual or a family, is to run to safety to a big brand, because they do see that as a risk mitigator, obviously, as does the finance that is following them, the debt that's following them. Now, that brand may not be the right brand for that project, but it does tend to tick boxes of risk mitigation. Whether it's the right risk mitigation, very often you don't know until you're actually deeply into it, and you find that brand can't cope. Or if you haven't gone branded, you should have had one in the first place. Again, like you don't generalize about Africa. I find it quite difficult to generalize about one product, one project to another.
Well, in some of the mature markets, Trevor, and I see we have Francis that have joined us, who obviously looks after the boutique lodging world.
Welcome.
And I'll pose that question to Francis. But before I do, in some of the mature economies, the lenders force you to have a professional management companies and possibly a large distribution network vis-a-vis a large brand. Is that an issue in African continent? And again, we speaking from generalizing point of view, but there are lots of locally homegrown brands that are doing incredible work. But is that an issue in capital markets?
Well, you mentioned distribution systems. Where you are dealing mostly more with international markets, and this would apply to any country, where you're dealing more with international markets, then the distribution system becomes very, very important. When you're dealing, and as is the case in many African cities, primary cities and secondary cities, where the market is more domestic, the distribution systems become less important. But from the capital market point of view, it's still the comfort of the brand there. I guess it's somebody to point a finger at with performance tests and liability to bring a brand in.
Well, thank you for that. I think this will be a great segue. Francis, welcome. You obviously look after BLLA, and your world and your members live in this sort of independent boutique world. First of all, what in the world is boutique hotels? Is there really a distinction, or is it just something that the industry has conjured up to confuse the travelers?
Well, actually, the travelers love hearing about boutique hotels. It's one of those words that you can really glamp onto because it means something special through history. You know, boutique has always meant something very special. So we did a study 10, 12 years ago with three universities around the world. And what is boutique? And it still actually is the same today. But on BLLA.org, you can actually find that we have 14 definitions of boutique hotels for starters. So anywhere from adventure boutique to boutique cruises, as an example, because they have rooms as well. But we also have a clear distinction on it's more independent, more upscale. But it doesn't mean luxury necessarily. It just means, you know, attention to detail, whether that's in design or services, etc. That is a boutique hotel.
Well, Francis, boutique movement started out, I guess, at one point when there were lots of assets that were going through the adaptive reuse, and it was a different lodging facilities. Unfortunately, fast forward to today, there are hotels with hundreds of keys that are calling themselves boutique. So how does the consumer know what is really boutique? It's kind of like the conversation about craft beer versus Anheuser-Busch.
Right.
You know, Anheuser-Busch now is starting to produce beer that they're marketing it as craft beer. So is it just a marketing story, or is there truly a distinction to be had?
There's truly a distinction to be had. It's a little more complicated. We have a brand called StayDashBoutique.com where a consumer can come. And we're not only teaching the industry on what a boutique hotel really is, but we're also starting to teach the consumer because they are confused. If they go to, you know, one of the OTAs or whatever, and you do a search on boutique hotels, you're going to get a lot of different things and a lot of, you know, branded properties in there that are nowhere close to being called. They shouldn't be called a boutique. But those OTAs don't really know, you know, how to sort out the list. We have a master list of about 14,000 properties so far globally that we vetted every single one. And you can see they get a cherry so they're cherry picked properties that they've been authenticated and vetted. Now, there might be a few branded, like an autograph collection or something like that might fit the bill, but there are just, you know, a few of those. Otherwise, they're, you know, independently owned and operated and managed by, you know, dozens and dozens of new boutique brands that are out there picking up properties with their own secret sauce of how they operate properly. So they are, you know, small brands, 10, 12, 15 properties.
So, Francis, tell us a bit about what your members are dealing with these days and what is their future horizon looks like. Are they in growth mode? Are there development opportunities globally, or is the industry at a bit of a standstill?
Oh no, this sector, I've never seen so much activity in this sector. We have a division called Boutique Money Group where we do matchmaking. I've never seen or had so many calls from people that are either investors that are looking for projects or projects that are looking for more development and more partners or joint venture partners, et cetera. It's kind of wild right now because it is where the traveler, you know, prefers to stay unless they're going to a big group convention, you know, or something like that, or they have a negotiated rate, you know, at a big brand or what have you. Business travel just hasn't come back yet. We all know that. Groups have not come back. There are more meetings and so on going on, but I think it's mostly in our industry, you know, in the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry that we're seeing these groups coming back. So properties, they're dealing with doing deals with investors and funds that are saying, here's 170 million. Now go bring us some more boutique hotels, independently owned or franchise properties that are becoming independently owned because they don't want to deal with everything else. They just want to go independent and they don't really know how to do that. So, these brands will help them through the process. BLLA will help them through the process. We have courses and, probably 100 different videos in the back end to help them understand what they have to do. Because again, they're going to have to go through a process to be an acceptable boutique hotel. It doesn't just happen. But there are tons of these small brands. They're popping up every single day, 17 million here. They're just being thrown dollars to find projects, whether they're boutique hotels in major cities or, off the beaten path. And they're actually creating new brands.
True.
Yeah.
I guess the consumer certainly has gravitated to these individually branded places that are very unique and on many different fronts. The question remains from an investment point of view: are there just as good returns from lenders and the capital investment? But our business at the end of the day is a street corner business, so it would depend from each hotel differently. Any thoughts on that, Frances?
Yeah, I mean, hotels are showing operational performance right now. And even through the pandemic, I saw so many boutique hotels that were, getting close to $1,000 a night if they were a luxury boutique property. And obviously they're being booked by, everyone who's sick and tired of either working at home or they want a drivable location, to take their family to or what have you. And they're not staying in major cities necessarily. So hotels are doing very well on performance in the boutique sector. And that's what kind of drives investors to be interested in this. They don't need to depend on, the brand's reach. If you know what you're doing, digitally, people can find you directly. And even on StayDashBoutique.com, we direct all business back to the hotel's website. So direct bookings, I think, are growing in our sector as hotels really learn how to navigate their finances, to be honest, from an operational standpoint and, from getting the business. What is the bottom line? On P&Ls, they're going right to the bottom line these days.
Frances, there's a question that has been posted up that since the definition is so broad and widespread popularity that has led to the rapid expansion in this space, should there be sub-sectors that it should be created or sub-segments? And if so, what would that be?
Well, I think the sub-segments are pretty much taken care of in the categories that we've created. We're probably going to add a few more categories, but if you go to blla.org and scroll down a little, you'll see the definitions, on a particular page. And those categories go anywhere from motels. I was never going to accept a motel, as being real, but lo and behold, the June Motel from Canada came up to us. And when I looked and saw what they had done, it was so amazing that they've now built a second property and they're on Netflix. So they're on Netflix with their own program about how to develop, kind of a luxury upscale motel. So I think, there are other categories of supply coming in, whether that's glamping or, camping or something else that fits into boutique, as long as it's upscale again. Glamping is a more luxury experience in a tent, right? Where you're fed great food and, you're taken on experiences that usually in Africa mostly, but now it's all over the world.
Yep,
so
yep.
There's new supply coming in for sure.
Trevor, question for you. In the era of brand proliferation, and there are lots of brands, more coming every day. Have brands lost their value, or is it still valuable? And I know this is again a generic question, but looking at the industry overall, you've been involved in it and you have helped people not only in Africa, but in Europe and Americas, and you've been around the block for a few times. Your thoughts on branding?
Who am I going to upset? Of course, the brands have a valuable role to play. That, I mean, they wouldn't be so successful. They wouldn't be billion-dollar corporations if they were not successful in bringing benefits to hotel owners. I like anybody, I get bemused by the proliferation of brands, and you hear of Hilton, Marriott, Accor, whoever have got a new brand coming, and you think, another one? 30 brands, 40 brands? Have you got any room to write on your letterhead anymore with all those brands along the bottom? And you think, why? Is there really a need for all those brands? But then, having said that, totally on the subject, you look in the supermarket and how many brands of Colgate toothpaste, or sorry, how many sub-brands of Colgate toothpaste are there? I want one. And I counted 14 different Colgate toothpaste the other day. So it's not just hotels that are at it. As I was alluding to earlier, though, it's not every hotel that needs a brand that needs the distribution systems, because we didn't used to have brands. Let's face it, brands are a relatively new invention in the hotel industry. What, 80 years ago, maybe 70 years ago? And the hotel industry, of course, as we're told, is at least 2,000 years old. So brands have a wonderful part to play, but more and more brands are distribution systems. Especially when you stop putting your name on the top of the hill of the hotel, and it becomes a soft brand, and it's still the Grand Hotel managed by. Therefore, the name doesn't mean much anymore. It's what comes behind the brand, which really is that distribution system. It's actually putting heads in beds and generating revenue. So, in my experience in Africa, and again, but going back to what I was saying before, the brands don't necessarily generate revenue for every hotel. And not only is that a question mark about, well, what are they doing? It means that the owner's saying, well, why am I paying fees if they're not generating revenue? So I kind of got a bottom line there. Anybody can do quality control. Anybody can actually run a hotel. It's not rocket science. It's the distribution system. And if the distribution system isn't bringing value, then the brand and what goes behind the brand isn't bringing value.
Well, I guess brands tend to be emotive, and we'll move on to a next topic, but brands tend to be emotive. You talked about the brands of toothpaste within one manufacturer, if you would, and they would have a whole lot of different things. And I guess that's what the consumers look out for. But to be perfectly candid, even within the boutique environment or some of the legacy brands, if you ask the industry would have a tough time defining the differences, much less the consumer. And that's sort of what I was grappling with, that is it just the brand for the sake of the brand and it happens to be from ABC company, or are there distinctive differences? But let's move on. Government support in the markets that you have been actively involved in, particularly during the pandemic. How has that worked out? Has it helped, or is there distress yet to be seen?
Sorry, did you say lender support?
Government policies, fiscal policies, and their support.
Well, there are countries in Africa which rely heavily on tourism. The biggest one in sub-Saharan Africa, I guess, would be Kenya. Kenya, Tanzania, the Indian Ocean islands of Mauritius and Seychelles. South Africa, very much, a lot of the Southern African countries, and then Gambia, Cape Verde. Those countries seem to have had a lot more government support than have others. Those governments who don't see lots of people coming in bathing clothes and their bucket and spade, what they call tourists. Of course, we call tourists anybody who is traveling overnight away from home. And so business people, conference delegates, and so on. Those governments tend not to recognize that tourism is an industry and therefore don't support don't support so much as those who have the leisure tourism. Kenya's support has been terrific. One always points to Cabinet Secretary Balala as being a real champion of tourism within Africa. They changed the tourism minister in South Africa. I believe she's been doing a good job. Gambia, huge support to tourism. Well, they didn't have any. They didn't have any to support, but they were out there lobbying, saying, "Come back, come back, come back." So there seems to be a division between leisure-led tourism destinations and the non-leisure, the business tourism destinations, which is many cities throughout Africa. Yeah, let's leave it there before I upset anybody.
Fair enough. Francis, from your members' point of view and them having access to capital, you said there is a lot of money that is being talked about and people are actively looking for assets. Have there been transactions? Because this money was brought together really to get the deals, but that distress has not been seen in the market. What have you seen and what are your members experiencing?
There's lots of transactions going on every single day. Before we move on that, can I just say one thing about the brands? The brands do have, those boutique brands. They started coming to our conferences in 2010 to learn what next they should do. And you saw a proliferation of more brands coming out. Some of them did call me and I told them, if you could leave your hands off that boutique brand, some of them have done well, some have not done well, honestly. And this is just feedback I'm getting from the industry itself. But as an example, what just closed recently was the Ennismore deal with Accor. So that is all, a whole lifestyle portfolio that Accor has acquired. And the last being Ennismore, which is Sharon Pasricha out of the UK and his people. And I think they're going to leave that group alone because there's some phenomenal brands in there. So I just wanted to say that. But moving on to transactions, there's so many transactions going on. So let's just say, as an example, Lifehouse. Lifehouse is growing. That's Life-House. They started out not too long ago, I would say 2 years ago, building their own brand. And then again, they had that secret sauce of operationally from technology and otherwise that they could bring to other properties. So we're seeing more of those brands happening. They've raised $40 million since half of that this year, actually. And they've got like 11 investors involved in that. We've got Pally Society, which, is a phenomenal boutique brand. They acquired a group called Arrive Hotels, and they've got locations now all over the place, from Austin to Palm Springs to Tennessee, all over the US. They may go internationally at some point. The same with Lifehouse. They're looking, at properties on an international basis, whether it's Costa Rica or otherwise. Graduate Hotels actually has a potential investor with $1 billion. It doesn't mean it's all going into graduate hotels. Graduate hotels are on campuses, and they started popping up, better. In Europe, ASOS Hotels, run by Benjamin Habil. He just spoke at our conference a couple of weeks ago. Limestone Capital Group, they've got They're buying properties up all over Europe. Phenomenal.
So a lot of
properties.
transactions.
There's a lot of transactions. I mean, I could go on and on and on because I went through our members just to kind of see who's doing what, you know, as of today. And the list goes on and on and on.
Well, we down to 5 minutes. Trevor, buy or build? Where would the valuations be better?
Building does seem to take longer in many African countries than elsewhere. If you can buy, definitely buy. Obviously, as with anywhere, they bring legacy problems, particularly with the mechanicals, the MEP. But if you can find an asset to buy, then it seems a heck of a lot quicker to enter the market than to actually build. You've got less regulatory and authority issues to deal with, let's say less corruption probably in the entire process to deal with. I mean, if I may, I just saw a question coming up about ESG. Environmental, social, and governance. May I just make a comment on that?
Please.
Thank you. Because I'm absolutely convinced that this is getting more and more and more important, both from the investment side and the consumer side. Who is driving ESG? Well, everybody's driving it, but from our point of view as investment advisors, these days, if you want quoted companies, if you want institutions to come into a hospitality investment, ESG is now, I heard that it's now business critical. It's not a nice to have, it's a have to have. And I just see this, and this is nothing to do with COP26. This is a fact, not a one-off wonder because there's a conference on at the moment. But the whole environmental aspect is becoming so critical in our business. We are huge users of power. We're huge users of water, and social impact through staff and community, etc. But of course, the consumers are driving it. The brands are driving it. There's not a single brand out there that doesn't have some kind of green policy. So I wanted to throw in that. I'm sure Francis, within the boutique community, you have much to say.
Absolutely, and going back to the government, you know, we had the PPP loans going out here, which helped tremendously. However, it also the unemployment and everything harmed the industry because labor just stayed home and they didn't come to work. So there's a huge labor issue going on right now, and the properties can still use help, but boutique hotels are doing better and better as far as government assistance.
Trevor, there was a comment made that the energy savings are typically out the window immediately because developers are cutting costs. Any thoughts on that? I guess the construction codes have to change.
My home for many years has been Nigeria. We don't do power in Nigeria. There are some days where there is no electricity generated in Nigeria at all. What do we do then? We run on generator, we burn diesel, we put particulates into the air. Yes, I totally agree, but we can be more careful about, do we have to run that generator 24 hours a day, or could we give it a rest and not pollute so much? So yes, Arshad, I fully appreciate the point you're making, but I think you've gone to the extreme. It's not completely out of the window. We can still be saving water, and in many African countries, water is critical. And then there's the social impact as well. Do we really look after our staff in our hotels in Africa? Well, yes, many do, many don't. And they say that one worker in a hotel in Africa is supporting 5 people, at least 5 people back at home. So did you have to make that person redundant? Or, you know, there's that social aspect as well. Point about power noted, but it's not just chucking it out the window.
Well, look, you are absolutely correct. Your question relative to do we really look after the hotel staff, that is the big debate in the industry, quite candidly, in some of the mature markets, the great resignation as it's being labeled. It is talked about that it's an endemic issue in the industry because we still haven't gone beyond the transactional relationship that we've developed with our staff. So it is a big issue, but nonetheless, travel and tourism and hospitality does create massive employment opportunities. Look,
more than any other industry.
That is correct. That is correct. I was reading an article not too long ago. Virtually the largest employer, one of the largest employers in the world, is travel and tourism industry. And
right.
The more we learn about how to do things better and differently, the more we would improve. I guess we might be running out of time because I was prompted that there is 1 minute left. I'm not sure if there is a minute left for question answers or have we run out of time. So you guys have to bear with me as we figure that out. But we'll keep talking until, well, I guess we have run out of time. Trevor, thank you so much. Francis, thanks for joining us. The start might have been a bit rocky, but your inputs have been fabulous.
Join the boutique revolution, everybody. It's phenomenal out here.
Thank you much.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.